Foreshadow. Be warning of, or to indicate or suggest something, usually something unpleasant, is going to happen. If you've been paying attention at all, you know that not only was 9/11 another false flag attack perpetrated by the powers that shouldn't be, but it was also foreshadowed before it happened a ridiculous number of times in every form of media imaginable. A favorite place for the cabal to do their foreshadowing is in popular cartoons like Family Guy and The Simpsons. And of all the obvious 9/11 references in the 1997 Simpsons episode, City of New York vs. Homer Simpson, one scene actually gives us a big clue to something else they've done. Something that might be one of the biggest jokes they've played on us yet. Making us carry around pictures of 9/11's horrors in our wallet on their fiat paper currency. In one particular scene of this Simpsons episode, the family is discussing going to Manhattan. Lisa holds up a bus schedule that clearly shows 9 and 11, the 11 represented by the Twin Towers on the front cover. This, paired with talk of going to New York where 9/11 happened, is already rather brazen. But then Bart holds up a bunch of money in front of the numbers 9 and 11. The price of the bus trip, or the reason unemployed 10-year-old Bart has this cash, does not come up at any other point in the episode. It's simply a clue within a clue: 9/11 and money. So let's take a close look at our money. When this episode aired, the Rockefeller's Federal Reserve had just released a new series of bills with changes made to all of the buildings on the backs of the 5 to the 100. No significant changes had been made to the backs of the bills since the 1928 series. On the new 1996 series of bills, all of the same buildings appeared on the same denominations, but each one was either moved a bit or a completely different side of the same building was now shown. The Lincoln Memorial has always appeared on the modern $5 bill, but on the new 5, the building was widened and lowered down a bit. On the new 10, the Treasury building has gone from an angled view to a dead-on frontal view. The new 20 has gone from showing the famous view of the south side of the White House with the round portico to the completely opposite north side. There are actually two new 50s. The old bill from 1928 showed the east side of the Capitol building, but as of the 96 series, the west side now appears. The 96 series shows a blank sky behind the building, but as of the 2004 series, big white clouds appear behind the west side view. They barely touched Independence Hall on the back of the $100 bill, except to move it up just slightly. To see these pictures for yourself, you'll need a current $5, $10, $20, and $100 bill. You'll also need two $50 bills, one without the clouds from somewhere between 1996 and 2004, and the new 2004 series bill with the clouds. Both are still in circulation as of 2013. Place each bill face up, fold the bottom up, find the center point, and bring both ends up like so. Folded this way, the old bills showed nothing of note. But the new bills show these 6 scenes, each one framed by an arch. The arch shape framing each scene was added to every bill that didn't already have it as of the 1996 series. It represents the Washington Square Arch, which is about 2 miles north and to the east of where the towers once stood. More about that arch in a moment. These 6 folded bills, all but one of them released 5 years before 9/11, depict the scenes that took place before, during, and after that horrible day. The $5 bill shows what looks like 2 towers, but they're shorter than the towers on the 10 and the 20. This is because in this scene they're still being built. David Rockefeller spearheaded the project to build the towers in the late 1960s. Together with his brother Nelson, New York governor at the time, they made deals, flexed political muscle, and soon the Port Authority of New York initiated eminent domain proceedings against the outraged residents and businesses in Lower Manhattan that stood where the Rockefellers wanted the towers built. Over 300 businesses were displaced and destroyed to make way for the towers. Here's David Rockefeller in 1967 on the cover of Newsweek, less than 1 year after the groundbreaking for the WTC began. The hands on his watch, which is prominently displayed, are set at 9 and 11. The folded $5 bill shows the Twin Towers in the midst of their construction. You can even see something that looks like the kangaroo cranes used to build the towers on the top. The folded $5 bill is scene 1, towers being built. The $10 bill shows the tower on the right, which, through the arch, would be the North Tower, with what looks like fire and smoke close to the top. The North Tower was the first one that was hit on 9/11 between the 93rd and 98th floors of the 110-floor building at 8:46 a.m. Note that the artist decided for some reason to make a few leaves going in a different direction than the rest right here, exactly where the iconic first plane hole on the north side of the North Tower would appear on 9/11-2001. The folded $10 bill is scene 2, North Tower hit. The $20 bill shows the tower on the left now with the fire and smoke, much lower than the one on the right. This is because the South Tower would be hit next, about 20 floors lower than the North at 9:03 a.m. A close-up of the top areas of the 20 shows clustered groups of oval shapes supposedly representing leaves, but none of these leaves are found in the close-up of any of the other bills. Many of these oval shapes seem to be arranged one on top of the other. Could we be looking at something else they knew would happen on 9/11? Are these representative of their victims, clamoring for air in the final moments of their lives, piled on top of each other in the extremely narrow windows of the towers? The folded $20 bill is scene 3, South Tower hit. The 1996 $50 bill and the 2004 $50 bill show the next two scenes, but they're out of order. I guess even arrogant, psychotic Satanists have to be a little bit subtle. The 2004 $50 bill, folded, is an obvious depiction of the towers being demolished. Scene 4. The 1996 $50 bill shows scene 5, Nothing Through the Arch, which is how the view looked from after the destruction of the Twin Towers on September 11, 2001, until the next scene was made reality around 2009. In 2007, despite a great deal of opposition from local politicians and the artists and residents who use Washington Square Park, the City of New York Parks Department and Rockefeller cohort Mayor Michael Bloomberg pushed through a park renovation project, spending tens of millions of dollars to, among other things, move the Washington Square Park's fountain from the place where it had been located in the center of the park for 138 years. The new spot for the fountain? 22 feet east, so that it now sits almost in line with the opening in the archway. This is the view through the arch today. The folded $100 bill is the sixth scene, the water fountain. There's a biblical connotation to the entire 9/11 ritual that explains why this water fountain would be the final step. The Twin Towers and Building 7 represented Solomon's temple. The view of the fountain through the arch today signifies the water siphoned to the temple to wash away the massive amounts of blood from the sacrifices that took place there. Here are two pieces of King Solomon's actual aqueduct on display at the Rockefeller Museum in Jerusalem. This water fountain through this arch is what one will see today when traveling down Fifth Avenue from Midtown to Lower Manhattan. Someone like David Rockefeller, who has a home in Midtown Manhattan. David has been making the trip south to Lower Manhattan since at least the 1950s. Ever since he had his office built 3 blocks from where he would then have the World Trade Center built. The residents who opposed the moving of the fountain altogether are still angry about the destruction of the character of the historic park, the cutting down of dozens of mature trees, and the lack of funds left over for normal maintenance. They've also noted that the fountain is still not aligned with the arch in Fifth Avenue, which was the excuse given for moving it all along. Here's what the new fountain is in line with. As for the Washington Square Arch itself, it was supposedly erected to commemorate the 100th anniversary of Washington's inauguration. Designed by Stanford White and built in the 1890s, White also designed the nearby Judson Memorial Church, which was financed by David Rockefeller's grandfather, John D. Rockefeller. The arch is said to have been built to frame the view of the church, but it only does that from the side. What the arch did frame perfectly was the Twin Towers of the World Trade Center. How interesting that John D. Rockefeller's grandson, David, would see to it that the towers were built in the perfect spot to be framed by that arch in the late 1960s.
The two of you, when you were a leader at Chase Manhattan and he was governor, were responsible for, really, the World Trade Center.
We worked together on that.
He has left his imprint on urban redevelopment projects from Lower Manhattan to San Francisco's Embarcadero.
Lower Manhattan.
The cornerstone of this arch was laid in 1890 in accordance with the ancient rites of Masonry and in full Masonic ritual. Presiding at the dedication ceremony for the arch were 10 officers of the Grand Lodge of Masons. You know, the Masons, one of those repugnant secret societies Kennedy warned us about.
The very word secrecy is repugnant in a free and open society, and we are, as a people, inherently and historically opposed to secret societies, to secret oaths, and to secret proceedings.
In 2000, the New York City Parks Department embarked on an extensive restoration of the arch. They unveiled and rededicated the arch on August 16, 2001, just 26 days before it would frame the most horrific mass murder in the history of the United States. The arch has two inscriptions on it. One is a George Washington quote that ends in the words, "The event is in the hand of God." Washington was talking about the creation of the Constitution when he supposedly said this. There are also two 16-foot-tall statues of Washington on the arch. Behind the statue on the west side of the arch, a figure called Justice is holding a book directly over the statue of George Washington's head. The book says, in Latin, Exitus acta probat, which translated means, the outcome justifies the deed, or in other words, the end justifies the means. What event and what deed could the Masons who erected this arch have been referring to? Here's the Washington statue on the east side of the arch, complete with something that looks like a chain leading up under Washington's cape. The view of the towers through the arch was a favorite for photographers, painters, and filmmakers. Here's a scene from When Harry Met Sally, showing the arch and the towers. Note how they're sure to show us this University of Chicago window sticker. The University of Chicago was founded by John D. Rockefeller, and it's where David Rockefeller received his PhD. To recap, the $5 bill shows the towers being built, complete with the cranes used to build them. The $10 bill shows the North Tower burning and the iconic first plane hole. The $20 bill shows the South Tower now also burning and human head-shaped objects stacked up like the doomed innocent men and women in the windows on 9/11. The 50s show the towers exploding into dust and the empty sky afterward. And the $100 bill shows the water plume of the new, arbitrarily moved for no apparent good reason and at tremendous expense, fountain in Washington Square Park. All framed by the Washington Square Arch, with its cryptic inscriptions, Masonic roots, and statue of our first president and father of our country with what looks like a chain on his leg. Could this arch have been built to frame a liberty-destroying false flag like 9/11? Since it was erected in the late 1800s, this might seem like a ridiculously long time to wait for the event that justifies the deed, but maybe the event was supposed to happen much earlier. In fact, in the early 1900s, some unidentified, extremely affluent financier approached famous Spanish architect Antoni Gaudí to design a hotel to be built in Lower Manhattan. Gaudí's Gothic-inspired creation would have had at least one 1,100-foot-tall tower. For unknown reasons, the plans fell through. Gaudí, a religious man, abandoned all of his secular work and cloistered himself inside the workshop of La Sagrada Familia. Turns out, Gaudí's Gothic hotel would have been built on the exact spot where the Twin Towers, with their Gothic-inspired exteriors, would be built in the late 1960s thanks to good old David. Could the mysterious, extremely affluent financier have been John D. Rockefeller? Could the plan have been put on hold because the richest man in history had also become the most hated man in America? Ida Tarbell's book and character study exposing his evil turned public and political opinion against him. The 1914 Ludlow Massacre didn't help the Rockefeller name either. John D. Rockefeller spent much of the last 30 years of his life in hiding. On page 4 of his 2002 autobiography entitled Memoirs, David writes of how pleased he is that people close to his grandfather say that he is the grandchild most like him, and that he was very much his grandfather's favorite. What's with the Rockefeller family's apparent desire to make sure that a Gothic building went up on that spot in Lower Manhattan? Well, short of a confession, we can only speculate, but the Goths were basically a Germanic people who, in the 3rd to the 6th century, basically went around ravaging, pillaging, and plundering much of Europe. When they conquered Rome, they destroyed the ancient buildings and built new Gothic structures. The 2006 New York Sun article entitled American Gothic is about John D. Rockefeller's love of Gothic architecture. Rockefeller financed the Gothic Riverside Church and the Gothic Central Presbyterian Church, both in New York, and there are many Gothic buildings on the campus of his University of Chicago, including the Rockefeller Memorial Chapel. The Rockefellers are of Germanic lineage. They came to America from Germany in the early 1700s. Are they descendants of the Goths or Visigoths? Do they feel that they're completing the work of their ancestors? Is their goal to destroy the American Empire just as the Goths destroyed the Roman Empire? On page 55 of Divided We Stand, a biography of the WTC published in 1999, the author seems to make that connection. He's writing about the decision to build the towers, and he actually compares it to the Visigothic armies closing in on Rome. Here's page 405 of David's book Memoirs again. Here he admits that he's proud to be part of a secret cabal working against the best interests of the U.S. The horrors of 9/11/2001 happened inside two 1,300-foot death traps that David is responsible for building. Has there ever been an event that worked more against the best interests of the U.S. than 9/11?
I actually was there and saw the building collapse.
This family made their fortune here, then set to work using that money and the power that it brings against the rest of us. They covertly control everything that matters: education, medicine, our politicians, our military and economic systems, and our media. In the words of John D. Rockefeller himself, competition is a sin. They already have all the money they could ever want. Now they want complete control of the rest of us. False flags like 9/11 and their mass shootings are designed to make us give up all of our rights and take away our means of defending ourselves. Every incident is a step toward their plans for world government, with themselves and their cronies running things. Unfortunately, the story of the pictures on the money doesn't end here either. A new $100 bill is due to be released on October 8th of 2013, and they've made major changes to the picture of Independence Hall. Remember, this is the building that underwent the smallest amount of change on the 1996 series. Now the building is being shown from the completely opposite side, the north instead of the south. This bill hasn't been released yet, but an image editing program can tell us what it's going to look like folded. The well-defined arch is gone, and we see an object that resembles a torch, with a puff of fire or smoke emanating from the top. NYU, where the Washington Square Arch resides, has a torch as its symbol, but this torch actually bears a much stronger resemblance to the Marathon torch built for the 1928 Olympic Games and located in Amsterdam. It held the first Olympic flame ever lit during the Olympic Games. If this is the Marathon torch in Amsterdam, it's also important to note that the recent Boston false flag happened right in front of a store called Marathon Place, and New York was called New Amsterdam in the 17th century. Are they giving us a clue about the next false flag? This guy knows, but he's not talking. He's the main person behind the events of 9/11 and the only person on the planet whose name is all over those buildings and who could have put those images on the money, yet he still walks the streets of New York like a damn celebrity and is bowed down to and honored by those who propose to rule us. Let's put a stop to his reign of terror on behalf of the almost 3,000 people he killed on 9/11 and on behalf of the billions of others that have perished due to him and his family. This is the only way, in the words of John F. Kennedy himself,
man will be what he was born to be, free and independent.
Control freaks that are running things have a code. They have to give us clues about the evil things they've done or plan to do. If we don't figure it out and do something about it, they figure we deserve what we get. Leading up to September 11th, 2001, the date, the numbers 9 and 11, were foreshadowed many times in the media by these people, appearing on clocks, dials, dates on paperwork, and countless other ways. Here we'll look at just some of the analog clocks with the hands either directly or almost directly pointing to 9 and 11, or pointing to 11 minutes past 9, that were purposely shown in movies and on television between 1978 and 2001. At the end, you'll see a clock that will tie the events of 9/11 in with the person who was the main driving force behind what happened on that day. He's also one of the only people on the planet who actually had the means to arrange all the foreshadowing before the crime and the motive to carry it out. And it's not this guy. Superman, released 23 years before the crime in 1978. The clock behind Clark Kent shows the time just before 9:11 a.m. Another clip from Superman, 1978, entirely different day in the movie, clock hands pointing to exactly 11 minutes past 9. Trading Places, 1983, the clock on the wall has its hands pointing at 9 and 11. Twilight Zone, the movie, 1983. The clock with the spinning hands in the opening credits shows 9 and 11 on the dial right before it flies off the screen. Rambo 2, 1985. Clock behind two men in the movie shows 9 and 11. Mannequin from 1987. Clock behind the actors shows 11 minutes past 9. Awakenings from 1990. Clock behind those bars has the hands set closest to 9 and 11. Same movie, Awakenings, different clock, 11 minutes after 9. The Fisher King from 1991. Camera pans up to a clock on the Metropolitan Life Insurance Company Tower in Manhattan, hands at 9 and 11. The Distinguished Gentleman from 1992, 11 minutes after 9. Same movie, different clock, same time, 11 minutes after 9. The Paper from 1994. Man looks at his watch and the hands are at 9 and 11 on the dial. LA Confidential from 1997. Clock on the wall clearly shows 9 and 11. X-Files episode called Max from 1997. Camera shows a watch with the hands closest to 9 and 11. Another X-Files episode entitled Synchrony from the same year. Very clear shot of a clock shows 9 and 11. Godzilla, 1998. Man looks at his watch, hands are at 9 and 11. The 13th Floor from 1999. Clock on the wall has the minute hand closest to 9 and the hour hand closest to 11. Another X-Files episode called NME, hour hand closest to 9 and minute hand closest to 11. Maze, movie from 2000. Camera shows a night table with two clocks. The analog clock clearly shows 11 minutes past 9. Someone Like You, released in 2001. Clock hands pointing to 9 and 11. This next to last clock is in the background of a commercial that played on television the morning of 9/11 at 8:46 a.m., the same moment that the attacks on the towers began. It's an Entenmann's advertisement starring Whoopi Goldberg. Notice the time on the clock behind her. Meanwhile, in New York... Here's the last 9/11 clock in this series, and the most important. You're about to see a scan of a Newsweek magazine. The cover picture is of a man sitting in an office window, his watch prominently displayed. When the watch is flipped over to the way that the man would see it when it's on his arm, hands are pointing directly at 9 and 11. The second hand is even positioned exactly at the 11 mark on the dial. Here's a close-up of that watch. What separates this foreshadowing from the rest is the fact that this magazine is from back in April of 1967, less than 1 year after the construction of the World Trade Center towers began. And the man wearing the watch is the person who made sure they got built. His name? David Rockefeller.
The two of you, when you were a leader at Chase Manhattan and he was governor, were responsible for really the World Trade Center.
We worked together on that.
Lower Manhattan was deteriorating, and a radical plan for its revitalization was championed by David Rockefeller and his brother Nelson, then governor of New York. With Mayor John Lindsay on board, they set out to build a trade center, the likes of which the world had never seen, and on a shocking scale. 2 110-story towers.
Here is David today. David is proud of being part of a secret cabal working against the best interests of the United States. He brags about this on page 405 of his 2002 autobiography entitled Memoirs. He was also quoted prior to 9/11 as saying, We are on the verge of a global transformation. All we need is the right major crisis. And the nations will accept the New World Order. If you know anything about the New World Order, you'll understand why this is a big problem for a huge percentage of the people on this planet. Since they became obscenely wealthy back in the 1800s, David's family has been using their immense, ill-gotten fortune to take over literally every aspect of our lives as Americans. Our education and medical systems, our economy, and our media. These people love war, murder, corruption, oppression, and, if the right major crisis does not occur, they'll create it to further their agenda. And, as in the case of the time between the building and demolition of the World Trade Center, they can wait a very long time for their plans to come to fruition. Why would he show himself on the cover of a magazine with his watch hands set at 9 and 11 and make sure so many clocks show 9 and 11 in the movies and on television? It's all part of their code, and so far, they must think we're too dumb to notice. So remember who made sure those towers got built. 110 stories and a height of over 1,300 feet each. Enormous open floors that a fire could easily sweep across, and substandard fireproofing. No fire escapes and no automated sprinklers. And the next time someone tries to tell you that this guy and these guys committed the acts of 9/11 and brought us the Patriot Act, the NDAA, and the bogus war on terror and the encroaching police state. Remember the man who brought us the towering death traps, the same man who is proud to be fighting against the United States and what we stand for. And remember that this same person actually had the motive, the means to pull it off, and the ability to arrange all the clues you've seen here. Especially this one. Also remember that this person has gotten away with it for now.
I'm glad I did.
So here's an especially creepy example of foreshadowing and/or revelation of the method. I bought this magazine back in 2012 off of eBay because it's David Rockefeller, the man who more than anyone made sure that the Twin Towers got built so that he could destroy them with people inside. And it's shortly after construction began, so I thought there might be some interesting, sneaky revelation of the method style language in the article. Then I noticed that he has the hands of his quite visible watch set at 9 and 11. I always felt like there must be more to this cover, but it took me 3 years to figure it out. As you can see, he's sitting in the window of his office in 1967, 8 months after the groundbreaking for the building of the World Trade Center, with the hands of his watch set at 9 and 11, like I said. 9 and 11 on clocks was one of their favorite ways to foreshadow the upcoming date of their mass murder. They did this in many movies, television shows, and even commercials in the lead-up to 9/11. Either the hands are pointing almost exactly at 9 and 11, or it's 11 minutes after 9. There was always something that bothered me about the so-called plane hole on the north face of the North Tower, the iconic one that really represents the 9/11 false flag and the one that they show us the most. I knew it was an important shape and angle for Rockefeller, and he knew well in advance exactly what he was going to make sure that it looked like. After all, it appears on the $10 bill back in the 1990s series, along with all the other scenes from 9/11 laid out in perfect order on the bills. This is also one of the first things that showed me that there were no planes used on 9/11. So the other day it occurred to me, the fake plane hole on the North Tower looks like one of the wounds that was on the Jesus statue on the crucifix at the church when I was a kid. Same shape and angle. So I start looking up crucifixion images just to be sure, and this article comes up. Jesus' crucifixion date, possibly April 3rd, 33 AD, according to earthquake study. See, the Bible says that when Jesus died, the ground shook, and they're able to go back that far and figure out when earthquakes occurred, apparently. April 3rd just happens to be the date of this magazine. So then I checked how many years there were between 33 AD, the probable year of the crucifixion, and 2001, the year of the mass human sacrifice on 9/11, foreshadowed on Rockefeller's watch. The number was 1,967, represented by the year seen here. And in case you haven't heard, many people have been saying for quite a while that the probable actual birth date of Jesus was September 11, 3 BC. On that date, Jupiter, the king of the planets, collided with Regulus, the regal star, in Leo, the king constellation. I'll link to a much more thorough explanation below, but to me, it's one of those things that make a lot of sense. And after studying these people for a while, it's exactly the type of thing they like to do. Take something pure and important to a lot of people and twist it and pervert it. Have the sheep celebrate the birth of Christ on the wrong day, coinciding with a pagan holiday, actually. The very word Christ Mass does not mean the birth of Christ, but in fact his death. So they take the date 911 and corrupt it into something that in our minds signifies emergency, and make the actual day into a day of terror and sadness and mourning. And this is just the creepy member of their club that would enjoy gloating about it on a magazine cover. In the 1940s, David Rockefeller's uncle Winthrop Aldrich was on a committee to attempt to get the World Trade Center built back then. They were also foreshadowing 9/11 in the 1944 movie Double Indemnity, and even throwing in an allusion to the name Rockefeller in the same film. In the 1960s, a plan was introduced for a nationwide emergency number. Britain implemented 999 as their emergency number back in the 1930s. Australia and New Zealand selected 999 and 111 respectively as their emergency numbers in the 1950s. Yet for some reason, in 1968, just a year after this magazine came out, AT&T announced at a press conference that a universal emergency number was being established for the U.S. However, instead of 3 like numbers for ease of dialing in a crisis, numbers that could not be further apart on the dial would be used. 9 and 1 and 1 had been chosen by a computer, they said. Besides being a client of the Rockefeller-funded and directed RAND Brainwashing Institute, the 1975 book The Rockefeller Syndrome lists AT&T as just one of the many companies under Rockefeller control or influence. In the book Rockefeller, the Man Who Misrules the World, AT&T is referred to as the Rockefellers' family-owned monopoly. So they used their power to make the numbers 911, birth date of the Prince of Peace, signify danger and crisis, and after September 11, 2001, heartache and mourning. Rockefeller puppet Ronald Reagan even designated September 11, 1987 to be 911 Emergency Number Day, calling on the people of the United States to observe this day with appropriate ceremonies and activities. And every year, like clockwork, the Rockefeller Center Christmas tree, an enormous representation of the one thing the Bible tells us not to drag into our homes and decorate with gold and silver, is lit at 8:55 p.m., when the hands on the clock are exactly as they are on Rockefeller's watch. So here we have David Rockefeller, the man who was instrumental more than anyone on the planet in ensuring that the Twin Towers got built. Less than a year after the construction began, with the probable date of the crucifixion of Christ above his head, along with the years between that event and 2001 listed here, and the probable date of Christ's birth date and, of course, the date of the mass murder that took place in his towers in 2001 on his watch. A mass murder during which a slice appeared 1,000 feet up over southern Manhattan for all the world to see, similar to the wound depicted in many images of the person that the event seems to revolve around. And just as a side note, if you open this thing up, there's a cigarette ad on the back cover that puts 2 tower-looking things in red right about where the towers are being built, to David Rockefeller's right, if this picture continued west. So this is what we're dealing with. Sick, arrogant people that feel the need to put their mark on everything in an attempt to convince us that they have total control of everything, which means they don't. As for God and Jesus and the Bible, I know it's trendy to be an atheist and hate all religion, but obviously those who hoard the knowledge, the same people that do very well if we're misinformed, plan their events around these things we're not supposed to believe in. Maybe they know something we don't. All pertinent links in the description, and thanks for watching. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Seth MacFarlane's putrid palette of predictive programming, Pandemonium, brought to you by Seth MacFarlane, sleazebag trader who works for the satanic cabal that runs the entertainment industry. He says it's abhorrent when people recognize and point out his sneaky little clues that he inserts into his stupid cartoons, foreshadowing the events manufactured by the same cabal that pays him very well to do so.
Seth MacFarlane has criticized an online hoax clip of his animated series Family Guy, which was edited to make it look like main character Peter Griffin planned explosions at the Boston Marathon. MacFarlane called the clip abhorrent, and the original episode, which aired last month and did depict the main character running people over in his car at the marathon, has been pulled by Fox Broadcasting.
The lamestream media, controlled by the same people, repeats what he says, of course. No one investigates, and people continue to tune into Family Guy and American Dad without realizing they're being brainwashed and programmed to accept the cabal's plans. Let's do the media's job and take a look at the two most recent events he's foreshadowed for his evil masters, the Boston faked bombings and the death of Robin Williams. If a little bit of thought is applied to the seemingly random elements of the cartoon, one can see that we're actually watching a satanic ritual where the names, dates, places, circumstances, and even minuscule details of a future seemingly surprise event are actually planned down to the tiniest detail and shown to us in advance. MacFarlane's cartoons are one of their favorite places to do this. Let's start with Boston. First of all, in the episode entitled Turban Cowboy, which aired on St. Patrick's Day, March 17, 2013, only 29 days before the April 15th Boston Marathon, many details of the cartoon allude to the fake bombings and the official story afterward. At 1 minute and 11 seconds in, the main character's friend mentions that he used to be a horse whisperer, which is interesting because the main character in the movie Horse Whisperer has an accident on her horse and needs to have her leg amputated. I'm sure I don't have to tell you how amputation relates to what supposedly went on in Boston on April 15, 2013. At about 2 minutes and 40 seconds in, Harrison Ford is seen throwing skydivers off of a plane.
Wow, is that Harrison Ford? Yeah, it said in the brochure that he assists with all the jumps. Get off my plane! Get off my plane! Get off my plane!
Just like he throws a Russian terrorist off a plane in the movie Air Force One.
Get off my plane!
Our supposed Boston bombers are from Chechnya, a federal republic of Russia. The main premise of the whole episode is that the main character, Peter Griffin, converts to Islam. One of the supposed Boston terrorists, supposedly the bombing mastermind, was also a convert to Islam. Here's Tamerlan, our Boston bombing patsy Islam convert, right up next to Peter's friend Mahmoud, who gets him to convert to Islam. At 3 minutes and 40 seconds, Peter is seen driving a car down a street, running over marathon participants. There are dead bodies and body parts on the ground and a big swath of red blood trailing behind his car. Though this had never happened before, we would see this same sort of scene on Boylston Street in Boston less than a month later at the marathon. I'm trying to figure out which scene looks more cartoonish. Then Peter is asked by a cartoon Bob Costas how he won the Boston Marathon, just in case there's any doubt as to which race was just depicted.
I'm Bob Costas, here with Boston Marathon winner Peter Griffin. Peter, how did you do it? I'll tell you, Bob, I just got in my car and drove it. And when there was a guy in my way, I killed him.
At 4 minutes and 20 seconds in, the front of the Quahog Public Library is shown. Remember, the first of the two fake bombs occurred right in front of the Boston Public Library. At around 5 minutes and 38 seconds in, the Family Guy writers find an excuse to throw in a seemingly random reference to a bowl of M&Ms.
Oh my God, look, a bowl of M&Ms. What are we, 6?
Directly across the street from the Boston Public Library is a candy store called Sugar Heaven, part of the staging area for the fake injuries. Not only were there pictures of M&Ms painted on the front window of the store the day of the marathon, along with a handmade M&Ms sign, but a big blue M&M statue stood outside the door right in the staging area. Yes, they planned it down to that amount of detail. Please note that M is the 13th letter of the alphabet. 2 M's equals 26, just like the 26 miles of the marathon and the 26 people supposedly killed in their other false flag, Sandy hoax. Peter ends up in the hospital due to a skydiving accident and meets a Muslim man named Mahmoud, and later mentions that Mahmoud knew 19 guys who died on 9/11. MacFarlane's big on the 9/11 jokes.
Yeah, you know, if a teddy bear makes a joke about something taboo, like, I don't know, 9/11, it's still not okay. It's still not okay, but it maybe goes down a little bit easier because he's got cute fuzzy fur.
At 15 minutes and 30 seconds into the episode, Peter is seen sitting in a bar attempting to make a call to Mahmoud using a cell phone that Mahmoud has given him. He dials the number once and puts the phone to his ear at 15 minutes and 41 seconds. A bomb goes off outside a short distance away. Peter says something about the phone being busted, then dials again, which triggers another bomb outside, this one louder and closer, accompanied by screams.
Look, I'm gonna call Mahmoud right now on this cell phone he gave me. He'll tell you. Damn phone's busted. Maybe I dialed wrong. Peter, please stop trying to calm the mood.
Exactly like the two fake bombs that would go off in Boston about a month later, separated by about 200 yards. At the very end of the episode, 20 minutes and 55 seconds in, Peter uses the same cell phone again and blows up the Quahog Bridge by dialing the same telephone number.
Tell you what, let me call Horace and tell him to get our table ready.
In this same scene, Peter asks his policeman friend whether or not the Muslims that were plotting the foiled attack in the story are going to get a trial.
So what happens next? Do those guys all get trials?
Why ask this question? I mean, a trial for someone accused of a crime is just normal procedure, right? Except normal procedure was not going to be followed about a month later. They knew this, and that's why this part is here. The feds invoked a public safety exception and questioned Dzhokhar Tsarnaev for 36 hours before reading him his Miranda rights. Normal procedure doesn't seem to have been followed for Tamerlan Tsarnaev either. That's why the policeman's answer to Peter is basically no.
Well, you know, it's the process.
See, if you get the American people so riled up about a supposed surprise attack that they don't care about the rights of the accused, on some level you're getting them to acquiesce to the evisceration of basic rights for everyone, including themselves. Keep in mind that the episode aired on March 17, 2013, St. Patrick's Day, with its deep ties to the Irish and therefore Boston. This is not a coincidence. The title again is Turban Cowboy. Turban is for the Muslim terrorists depicted in the episode and the real-life Muslim patsies at the Boston fake bombings. But the cowboy part? Remember the big phony hero from the fake bombings, Carlos Arredondo? He was called the Cowboy Hat Hero because of his white cowboy hat he was wearing as he pushed a man he pretended to rescue past the cameras for their staged photo op. Even the hat's been proven to have been just a prop that was switched during the picture-taking session at the beginning of the fakery. See, they not only foreshadow the event, but they also like to allude to their manufactured official story afterwards. Here they do it in the very name of the episode. There's another Seth MacFarlane cartoon named American Dad, and on the episode entitled The Missing Kink, which aired the night before the fake bombings, a teenage girl tells the boy she's just gone out with that she had a blast on their date. The boy's reply blatantly indicates further foreknowledge of the false flag planned for the next day.
I had a blast. Well, call the bomb squad, because with the blast I had, that makes 2 blasts.
Now that there's no doubt that Toady Boy McFarlane was fed information about the Boston Marathon false flag ahead of time and told to incorporate elements of the story into his idiotic cartoons, let's move on to a more recent incident that he foreshadowed, where someone may have actually died. Robin Williams' supposed suicide on August 11th, 2014. Immediately preceding the announcement of Robin Williams' death, the BBC Three network just happened to play a repeat of a May 2012 Family Guy episode entitled Viewer Mail No. 2. The show began at 11:25 p.m. London time. The news of the actor's apparent suicide broke at around 11:50 p.m., 25 minutes later. So take a 21-minute show, throw in some commercials, and the completion of the show and the suicide announcement happened at pretty much the exact same time. The episode is broken down into 3 parts. The first part, entitled Chap of the Manor, portrays everyone in the Griffin family except Stewie as British, and says it's brought to you by BBC One, just in case you think it's a fluke that it's shown on BBC Three right before Mr. Williams' death hits the airwaves. At a minute and a half in, the family is watching a game show called Wheel of Politeness. For some reason, the Family Guy animators have elected to give only 2 of the visible spaces on the wheel the correct number of prongs, like the actual wheel from the American game show Wheel of Fortune. The 2 spaces that don't have excess prongs are 300 and 600. So here's a nice backwards 63, which is Mr. Williams' age at the time of his death. The number of prongs is their sneaky way of pointing it out. In the 1998 movie, What Dreams May Come, when Robin Williams' character dies and goes to heaven, his spirit guide says this to him.
Last time you saw me, I was 63, stretched out on a cardiac ward. Who wants to be 63 throughout eternity?
Yeah, who wants to be 63 throughout eternity? A little later in the same movie, his character's wife commits suicide. The climax of the Family Guy segment is a death that takes place in a tunnel. You'll never guess where Mr. Williams' character is when he dies in the movie What Dreams May Come. A tunnel. This is one of many examples of the Cabal connecting their clues in different places. like not only showing Lisa Simpson holding up this bus schedule to signify 9/11, but also having Bart Simpson hold up cash in front of it to tell you that 9/11 is laid out step by step in perfect detail on the U.S. money supply. At the very end of the Chap of the Manor segment, Lois says that she's just glad that everyone's safe and sound in their little row house. Peter looks at the camera and repeats row house, the same way he says roadhouse over and over again in another Family Guy episode entitled Brian's Got a Brand New Bag.
Well, I'm just happy our family is safe and sound back in our cozy row house.
Row house. Keep the change. Roadhouse.
This show starts with Peter Griffin in a video store buying the Patrick Swayze movie Roadhouse. The video store clerk attempts to give him a free copy of What Dreams May Come, which we just talked about, but he flatly refuses it. The movie is placed on a shelf with other unwanted Williams films. A few minutes later, Peter says, "Get off my plane," as he starts to attack the family dog in a fit of Roadhouse kicking imitation.
Get off my plane. It's not even the same. Oh, what the hell?
This Brian's Got a Brand New Bag episode that shows the movie What Dreams May Come aired on November 8th, 2009. 11/8 is the date of Williams' death, backwards. In the second segment, called Fat Man and Robin, hundreds of Robin Williams clones are shown, and Robin Williams, in various incarnations, stops Peter Griffin from committing suicide 3 different times. So it's very much about Mr. Williams. This segment begins with a roast of Mr. Williams, especially sickening because Mr. Williams would be cremated immediately after his death. Try as I might, I couldn't find one video on YouTube of a roast with flames on and around the initials of the person being joked about. The story goes that Peter wishes that everyone was Robin Williams. He's given the power to change everyone into Williams, and soon he's done this to pretty much everyone in town, including almost every member of his family. When Peter changes the local news anchor into Robin Williams, both of Williams' hands can be seen making the OK/666 sign, even though he only has 4 fingers, so it doesn't really... Oh, okay, that's better. A world filled with Robin Williamses loses its charm quickly. Peter can't stand the incessant and at times repetitive Robin Williams humor, and, seeing no way out, starts to try various methods of offing himself, but Robin Williams saves him every time. First, Peter tries to shoot himself in the head, but the gun turns into Williams because Peter has touched it. Peter then tries to throw himself in front of a moving car, which also turns into Williams, and Peter bounces right off. Peter then throws himself off a cliff, but the rock at the bottom turns into Robin Williams as Mrs. Doubtfire and cushions his fall. Peter then decides to tell all of the other Williams clones to go forth into the country and spread their comedy, but he orders 5 of them to stay as substitutes for his family. The final scene shows Peter and the 5 family replacement clones sitting at the kitchen table having breakfast. The Williams clones are dressed up like the various family members and are joking amongst themselves. Peter looks like he's lost his mind. Then they zoom in a bit, and the Robin Williams clone replacement for Brian the dog asks Peter to pass the coffee. Peter has cut off his hands in an effort to stop the curse of turning everything into Robin Williams, so we see only bloody stumps as he brings his hands up to the table. Do you see the problem with this scene? Robin Williams is supposed to have died, sitting in a chair, with something tight around his neck, and he also supposedly tried slitting his wrist. Here's an extreme Family Guy-style representation of this. There are only 2 inanimate objects that Peter turns into Williams that aren't directly related to stopping Peter's suicide attempts. One is a teapot, the other is a door. According to the official story, Williams closed one end of the belt he used to kill himself between a door and a door frame. In the third and last segment of the cartoon, called Point of Stew, a day of the baby's life is shown from his point of view. At the very beginning, we get a quick glimpse of the number 13 that goes by almost too fast to see. Then at bath time, Stewie plays with a shark in the tub. The town of Tiburon is where Robin Williams died, and Tiburon means shark in Spanish. Close to the end, Stewie goes back in time and prevents Kurt Cobain from committing suicide. So this is 4 times that suicide is mentioned in one way or another during a 21-minute-long Family Guy cartoon that heavily features Robin Williams, shown on the date of his death and ending almost exactly when news of Mr. Williams' death hit the airwaves. This is also the 20th anniversary of Cobain's very suspicious suicide, with his band being inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame this year and new evidence from the death scene being released. Then Stewie's mom reads him a bedtime story called Goodnight Town from Footloose. How random, right? Except for the fact that the main character in Footloose is from Chicago, just like the person whose death via faked suicide is foreshadowed in this cartoon. So to recap, McFarlane foreshadowed the hell out of the Boston mess. 29 days before, his cartoon referenced terrorists from Russia, a conversion to Islam, a library which is where the first fake bomb went off, the M&Ms in the victim injury scenery, dead bodies, body parts, and blood on the streets at the Boston Marathon, 2 bombs detonated a few seconds apart by cell phone, a reference to normal procedure not being followed after the arrest of Muslims, allusion to both the Muslims and the fake cowboy hat hero right in the name of the episode, and the night before on a different cartoon by Seth MacFarlane, a reference to 2 blasts and the bomb squad. And don't forget the horse whisperer mentioned at the very beginning, a movie in which the main character has had to have her leg amputated. As for foreshadowing Robin Williams' death, we see a backward 63, Williams' age at the time of death pointed out, an allusion to death in a tunnel, like Williams' character in another movie about death and suicide, which also foreshadows his age at death, Williams preventing suicide 3 different times in the middle segment. Mr. Williams, represented in the final scene of that segment, is sitting in a chair with something tight around his neck, which is how he's supposed to have died. Another person at the same table in this scene with his hands cut off, an extreme way of alluding to slit wrists. One of 2 inanimate objects in the entire cartoon not involved in stopping a suicide, changed into Williams being an item used in the supposed suicide. Covert satanic numerology in the 2 666s and the 13 on the block. Sneaky mentions of the town where Mr. Williams was born and the town where he died. Another suicide prevented in the final segment, which also serves to reference another celebrity who supposedly killed himself while still quite popular and under very sketchy circumstances 20 years ago. And the episode with all of this in it, replayed on the date of Mr. Williams' death, the end of the episode coinciding with the death announcement. All 4 of the episodes referenced here are available in various places online, and you can stream them on Netflix. Every single thing you have seen is only taken from those 4 episodes. If you can see this much foreshadowing and still say it's just coincidence, then you've obviously decided to remain willfully ignorant. Maybe it's too scary for you to believe that MacFarlane is only where he is because he's employed by a small group of pasty old ghouls who run everything and put clues about their evil deeds in your favorite TV shows. Maybe the broader implication of facing the fact that this is happening is too much for you. Maybe realizing that the idiot box is not actually there to entertain you and inform you is simply unthinkable. And as for you, MacFarlane, let's talk about what's abhorrent. Is it abhorrent for people to find and attempt to point out the work of some New World Order flunky traitor sycophant like you, who works for the group that's behind nearly every disgusting, unfortunate thing happening on this planet today? Or is it abhorrent to do what you do, sell out your fellow man, helping to foreshadow death and mayhem for your masters, so that they can feel as though they warned us, and that gives them a stay-out-of-jail-free card and license to do whatever they like? In the end, it's not going to have been worth it. So it's not coincidence, it's not synchronicity of the damn universe, and Mr. Williams did not commit suicide or autoerotic asphyxiate himself. To believe that he killed himself on purpose or otherwise is to ignore all the evidence of foreknowledge you've just seen here, or to somehow convince yourself that Seth MacFarlane is a psychic who can foresee when, where, how, and at what age a man is going to take his own life or lose at a dangerous sexual game played in private. It's very simple. There's a small group of very disgusting individuals who literally run this planet. They control pretty much everything, and they certainly control the media and the entertainment industry. That's who MacFarlane serves, and that's why this clown is a billionaire. If you don't understand why they do these things, look up predictive programming and educate yourself on the subject. It's not that they necessarily want us to know, they just want to be able to say they told us. Seth MacFarlane also helped his satanic masters foreshadow the September 11th attacks. Please visit and subscribe to the Betsy McGee channel on YouTube for this upcoming video and others. And if you still believe that cowboy hat-wearing Carlos Arredondo was some kind of hero at the Boston Marathon, please watch the Boston Marathon Maranathon. Warning, graphic fakery to follow. A bit like a horror movie, but not as convincing. Please be advised. Carlos Luis de Los Angeles Alexander Brian Arredondo Piedra, former rodeo clown known as El Gringo, native of Costa Rica, smuggled across the Arizona border from Mexico in 1980, obtained his green card by agreeing to testify against the people he paid to bring him here, and as of 2004, along with his ex-wife Melida, grieving parent and peace activist funded by your generous donations, turned Boston superhero. I'm not kidding, people are going to superhero conventions dressed as Carlos. Who has helped perpetuate the official Boston bombing myth, resulting in martial law on the streets of Boston, a further push for gun and gunpowder control, the death of at least one Patsy, and the slam-dunk conviction of the Patsy's 19-year-old brother in the minds of the dumbed-down American public. Now that he's finally a citizen, Carlos works with the cabal currently running this planet to help shred the U.S. Constitution, terrorize his fellow Americans, and hammer what might be the biggest nail yet into the coffin of the country he says he loves so much. Thanks, Carlos! USA! USA! Carlos's amazing and inspiring story of his brave work at the fake bombings was reported ad nauseum all over the world. Even the so-called alternative press was fawning all over this man. Long before the Boston incident, though, the media carefully chronicled his suffering over the death of one son in Iraq and the loss of the other to suicide, things that millions of other families go through. To find out why an inordinate amount of attention was given to this one person, let's relive his heroic actions by traveling back in time to the point where most of us first heard of Carlos. April 15th, 2013. Patriots Day, Boston Marathon. Perfect weather for a marathon with a high of 49 degrees, cloudy skies, and way too many police and race officials sporting identity-concealing hats and/or dark sunglasses. 4 hours and 9 minutes on the race clock, big boom, and here's our brave Samaritan, Carlos Luis de Los Angeles Alexander Brian Arredondo Piedra, rushing to the scene and scaling the fences to get to the injured. This is about where the story stops checking out. According to Carlos and the media, he jumped the fence, cleared barriers, and immediately started saving Jeff Bauman.
Immediately, we start clearing the area, the fence in particular, and then we start pretty much concentrating on one person at a time. Myself, I need in the ground to help this young man who lost both of his limbs.
When the bomb went off, he ran to the aid of a man lying on the sidewalk, missing his legs.
Carlos certainly won't have time for much else. Jeff's legs are completely blown off below the knee. Both of his femoral arteries are severed. One cut femoral artery spurts blood into the air at the absence of constant pressure as seen here. Two completely severed femoral arteries pumping several liters of blood out of the body per minute at high pressure is obviously extremely deadly. Jeff literally has minutes to live.
I was very afraid that Jeff might pass away on me.
Don't worry, Carlos. You went to work immediately, like you said. Well, here's a shot of Carlos just sort of standing there while Jeff rolls around on the ground behind Mary Daniel. You'd think he might drop that flag and get right to work, but here he is, stepping on the wooden fence, crushing that poor woman, puts his hero hat on, bending forward, but we can tell by where the man in the gray hoodie is that Carlos can't be far in enough to be helping Jeff. Looking up, turn around, monkey with the fence some more. Don't drop that flag. Looking out at the street, looking down at the ground, looking down the street. Aha, now he's helping move the barriers, even though they're almost gone. And plenty of other people are working on that. Here too, holding onto the metal bars, talking to some guy, looking around.
He rushed into the chaos.
Okay, here he is rushing. Oh, well, wait. Now he's talking to the man in the black jacket, who points to something in the melee. Then Carlos heads off to the right. Now the man in yellow comes in from the right side of the screen and takes Carlos's flag away. And he stuffs something into his pocket. Now the fence is gone, but Carlos is just kind of hanging around near the curb. Now a policeman type is pointing into the people pile. Is he showing Carlos who he's supposed to pretend to rescue?
Ain't nobody got time for that!
This doesn't go along with the hero rushing in to get Jeff Bauman to safety story at all.
This was the last remaining flag, was it not? And it was bloodied. Tell us how it came to be bloodied, Carlos.
Well, at one point I dropped the flag near the area where was all the victims in the ground. I pick it up and I put it in my pocket to realize later they was covered all in blood.
I was handing them out, and this one is one of the flags.
As for the bloody prop flag that Carlos posed with over and over again afterward, not only did Carlos hang on to the thing well past the time he was supposed to be rescuing people, in many scenes he's not moving barriers or helping people. He's focusing on the flag itself. Here Carlos has his back to the barriers that other people are removing. The red and white stripes of the flag can be seen here and there. He bends over, brings it down to the ground where we saw all that ridiculous pretend blood, then back up again. Here he can be seen examining it with blood already on it, and again from another angle. Here it is stuffed into his right front pocket, so no, it was no surprise later that the flag had blood on it. Before Carlos even got over to the area where he pretends to help Jeff, he makes sure the flag is properly bloodied, then puts it in his pocket. The flag spent no time at all on the ground.
Left the scene yesterday, Arredondo had one flag left. He told those around him, America is bleeding.
Oh, brother, America's not bleeding and neither was Jeff. That's why you had so much time to stand around doing nothing, Carlos.
I just concentrated on that young man and tied him up legs. I went into the ground to comfort him and let him know that he's okay, the ambulance is on the way.
Finally, we'll see Carlos within the crowd where Jeff has been waiting for so long. Standing up, looking around. Here he's sort of bent over in the melee. Maybe he's yelling his words of comfort down to Jeff. Picking something up, doing something with it. Is this where he's tying on the tourniquets? Someone hands him something. There goes Jeff's wheelchair. Many minutes have passed. You can tell because the barriers and fences are completely cleared, and even more so by looking at the crowd that has gathered at the supposed bomb site. The story of Carlos rushing in and doing anything is completely false. Another part of the valiant tale of Carlos and Jeff is that Carlos was the one that picked Jeff up and put him in the wheelchair all by his lonesome.
I picked him up from the ground. I set him in the wheelchair. I ended up picking him up from the ground to put him in a wheelchair.
He says I over and over again, not we.
And I grabbed that wheelchair, I picked up Jeff, and I put him in the wheelchair.
Even Carlos's new BFF Jeff confirms Carlos put him in the chair by himself.
Jeff, this sweaty guy in the cowboy hat was a welcome sight when you needed him.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
He was the one that picked me up off the ground.
The one that picked him up off the ground.
And then the first wheelchair, they arrived, I pick him up and put in the wheelchair and I drag him out of there because that's the only I can do at the time.
Watch inside this yellow oval. 3 people are about to lift something up. Hey, it's Jeff. Okay, here we go. See the lady with the red hat that will soon push the wheelchair holding it with another lady? Lots of people involved here. There we go, safe and sound in the chair. So despite what even Jeff says...
He said his shoulder was hurting, but he grabbed me with one hand, put me in the chair.
The placement of Jeff into the wheelchair was a group effort requiring at least 3 men, with a couple more including the leg fixer paramedic guy, and it certainly wasn't Carlos all by himself with one arm.
Then I managed to take him all the way to the ambulance. Yeah, I scored him out.
Even that involved 3 people, Carlos, and you weren't even the one pushing. Yet another part of the Carlos hero fairy tale is that he's a member of the blood-sucking phony relief agency, the Red Cross. Can't have just any flunky rescuing the most gravely injured person at the fake bombings, can we?
I'm a member of the Red Cross, the Massachusetts Bay group, and I'm sort of trained in some way, to disasters,
So if you're sort of trained in some way to disasters, and you supposedly applied more than one, why didn't you learn the word tourniquet?
Go across and help some people out by putting, ¿cómo se dice?
Tourniquets on their own.
I was putting tourniquets with their own clothes.
33 years in the U.S., Red Cross disaster trained, has to ask the ex-wife how to say tourniquet, then calls it something completely different on a radio show, even when the interviewer has just said the word twice.
So you put tourniquets, you and a fellow Samaritan, put tourniquets on both of Jeff's legs.
And we put tourniquets there.
Maybe it's the language barrier. Let's see. Spanish word for tourniquet. Oh, it's tourniquet. And about that badge.
Badges? We ain't got no badges. We don't need no badges.
I'm a member of the Red Cross.
Disaster team.
But Carlos had a badge, didn't he? That proves he's a real Red Cross worker guy. Oddly enough, Carlos showed up at the melee that day with a different badge around his neck. Here's the first badge, and here's the Red Cross badge that he was wearing for the cameras later. He can even be seen within the people pile, picking something up that looks like a badge, and taking the time to attach his black neck strap to the new badge and struggling to put it back on without taking off the stupid hat. This little clip's hard to see, but it looks as though Dr. Painter in the yellow shirt is actually helping Carlos get his new badge down over his hat. That's nice of him. When Carlos arrived on the scene, he took a few pictures, which he showed to an interviewer.
Oh my God, you excellent shots, my God.
Let's zoom in and see. Wow, it's Jeff. Here's Jeff laying on his side, being ignored by everyone but Carlos, who's taking his picture. Funny though, I've never seen Carlos's name in the photo credits on this one.
I saw the quantity of blood in the floor, and I know Jeff was the person who need to go soon, very quick, to the emergency room because he lost so much blood at the time.
That's what he said when he came up to me. He was like, no, he has to go.
But first...
Oh, you're wicked! You got your mojo working overtime, darling.
No, blood on the floor. Blood everywhere on the floor. What's a big pile of blood?
Blood on the floor? Blood everywhere on the floor? Well, of course they don't show us the area where Jeff is from this angle until they're good and ready. But here's the area a few feet away, right after the so-called bomb. There's barely anything. And from this angle? What is he talking? Oh, I see the blood. And where did those people come from? I guess it was just a matter of waiting until everything was in place.
The gentleman that I helped, he had a big fire going on in his shirt. I thought somebody was barbecuing.
This is Jeff. Jeff is not on fire. Maybe we misunderstood.
He had a big fire going on in his shirt.
This too is Jeff. Jeff is still not on fire. This clip was uploaded to YouTube in December of 2013. Despite many people noticing that the visual evidence does not support the fire shirt testimony, Carlos is still sticking to the Jeff on fire story.
His shirt was on fire. I said, oh Lord Jesus, it's a fire. See, it's this dark area. Yeah. All this dark area was on fire.
Imagine the burns Jeff would have suffered laying on the ground with his shirt on fire, just sizzling away all that time, while Carlos hung around by the curb messing with flags and chatting with people.
Hey, Rocky, watch me pull a rabbit out of my hat. Again? Nothing up my sleeve. Presto!
Wrong hat.
Carlos had the wrong hat when he showed up at the marathon. Check it out. That's the iconic hero hat we'll see later, but it says Costa Rica across the front. So for these pics, someone gave him a different hat to hold on to. It's a darker hat with a flattened out brim and a plain brown band. By the time he poses for the rest of the melee pictures and for his and Jeff's donation-inspiring wheelchair ride, he has his white Lone Ranger hat back. The hat tricks don't stop there. Take a close look at it in these pictures. Not a speck of anything on it. But then, in a documentary about what a hero he is, Carlos points out the blood on his hat and wears this smudged up thing during TV interviews. Are we to believe that the blood got up onto the hat after Carlos transported Jeff to the ambulance that he didn't need? If any blood was going to spray up over Carlos's head, wouldn't it have happened when Carlos was supposedly surrounded by severed, spurting arteries and applying tourniquets? Maybe Carlos has future plans for the hat when the donations dry up and people stop paying for his dinner. Here's what Carlos's shirt looked like when he was pushing Jeff, but later, during his dramatic interviews, it looked like this. I guess he kept it almost completely clean while he applied tourniquets and then single-handedly lifted a grown man with the bottom third of his body just blown off into a wheelchair, and also while he jogged alongside that wheelchair, pinching that man's spurting high-pressure artery. If we believe this, no wonder the cabal tells themselves that we deserve what they do to us. Please note the way Carlos holds his fake blood arm up over his tummy to make sure it gets into the pictures.
What's wrong with that picture?
Dondo, now bloodied and shaken, ran in to help.
Here's Carlos's pantalones during what's supposedly the last interview of the day. We know this because he tells the woman he's speaking to that he's about to go catch the Orange Line train and go home.
I gotta go maybe like a few blocks, quarter mile, to get the Orange Line train.
relatively clean jeans after all the fake carnage. However, someone gave Amy Goodman of Democracy Now! This picture of Carlos for her recent post about him entitled, "Searching for Peace at the Boston Marathon Bombings." Amy is a big help in promoting the Carlos Arredondo lie. More on Amy in a moment.
It was overwhelming to see all this blood everywhere and just kneeling in the ground on top of these people's blood.
Huh?
I don't know what happened to my shoes.
I didn't grab no shoes or nothing.
Melida, Carlos's ex-wife who was with him at the bombings, told ABC News that after Carlos was done being brave and heroic, she couldn't find him right away, but then she saw him, covered in blood. Hey Melida, we saw him too. He was barely even... oh, never mind. Also, a lot of people have noticed that Carlos said that all the flags were gone at the finish line from the bombing, when not a single flag was actually damaged in any way.
You know the flags? You ever see the flags? How they put
Those big flags. Yeah.
all the flags was gone. All gone.
Carlos did not rush to the scene, tear down barriers, put Jeff into the wheelchair by himself, and rescue him in the nick of time, despite what Jeff and Carlos say.
He ended up saving this severely injured young man, Jeffrey Bauman.
Between the hat, the clothes, the flags, what the visual evidence shows about what went on compared to what Carlos and the dinosaur prostitute media reports, this story is full of blatant lies and ridiculous exaggerations, all easily disproven and completely unnecessary if there was really a bomb and any kind of rescue. Carlos Arredondo is a manufactured hero. But the rest of the Carlos story is true, isn't it? Carlos is a great guy and a devoted, now grieving father, right? Well, since he made it onto the media's radar way back in 2004, we actually have some history we can examine, beginning with the van incident. On August 25, 2004, Carlos was outside his home in Hollywood, Florida, when 3 Marines arrived to inform him that his son Alexander had been killed in Iraq. Carlos literally lost it and torched the van the Marines arrived in, setting himself on fire by mistake as well.
Actually goes into the garage, picks up a can of gasoline and or a propane tank, runs towards the vehicle, smashes the vehicle window, and sets the U.S. governmental vehicle on fire.
In his agony and rage, he set a van on fire and received help through counseling.
The circumstances surrounding the event were reported correctly in the media at first. The Marines and responding police officers reported that Carlos did not appear that he was trying to get hurt or hurt. He was trying to destroy the vehicle, and that he set himself on fire in the process of trying to destroy the van. He ended up suffering burns because he accidentally spilled gasoline on himself. In this article entitled, "A Year After His Fiery Outburst, a Father's Scars Slowly Recede," copied to Carlos and Melida's website, Carlos admits that he didn't mean to hurt himself or anyone else when he torched the van. Carlos wanted the Marines to leave, but since he wasn't taking the news well, they refused to go until Carlos's then-wife Melida arrived.
I asked the Marine, please, leave my house. Can you please leave my house? So the Marine said, they asked me that. I said, we are here waiting for your wife. She's on the way. And I said once again, can you please leave my house? Can you please leave my house? And the Marines pretty much said once again, we're waiting for your wife.
Carlos smashed out the windows and the equipment inside the van, poured gasoline inside, and lit the van on fire.
I pretty much walked into the U.S. Marine van, and I pretty much started hitting the windows with a hammer. I opened the driver's side door of the van, and I put the gasoline right in the floor, and I proceeded to destroy a computer system that the van had inside there. I grabbed the propane gas torch, and accidentally at that point, I squeezed the flames. A big explosion occurred that knocked me out of the van, threw me on the air into the ground or the street in which I was on fire.
Carlos unintentionally spilled gas on his body too and ended up burning himself as well.
I start pouring gasoline everywhere. Well, me, no one noticed. The gasoline was getting all over my legs and pants and arms and leg and socks.
Carlos was also bothered by the fact that he did not know that 3 uniformed Marines arriving to speak in person to a Marine's family is often a notification of the soldier's death, and Carlos was, in his own words, in shock when he called his younger son Brian in Maine, and Brian knew that Alex had been killed simply because Marines had shown up there as well.
I said, Brian, I'm so sorry, Brian. The Marines are here, they're telling me Alex got killed. And Brian said, I know that, I know. So suddenly when my son responded to me, I was in shock because he knew already. And I said, oh my God, how do you know that? He said, Dad, the Marines are here too.
He testifies to this in many different interviews.
I said, how you know that? What I mean you know? He said, yeah, the Marines are here. I said, oh my God, yeah, the Marines are here too. And how you know that Alex died? What, did they tell you that? And he said to me, know that when I saw them coming, I know what they was here for. And I still trying to figure out what he's saying, and that break my heart right there in the spot. It's like I feel like a stab wound in my heart because there my son, 70-year-old, and he know what they was there for, and I'm the father of Lance Corporal Alexander Redondo, and I never know that was the process.
A tragic story, but not tragic enough. The story has been altered in the years since to say that Carlos set himself on fire on purpose, kind of a Buddhist monk sort of thing, despite what Carlos and the Marines that were there when he carried out the attack on the van said at the time. Melida, who wasn't even there, started dramatizing the story right away, to say that she was home at the time, Carlos immediately knew what the Marines were there for, and that he tried to purposely commit suicide. She told the AP and WFOR-TV she and her husband knew what was coming as 3 uniformed Marines approached their front door. She started to cry and Carlos simply snapped. She told ABC News that her husband immediately fell apart when he saw 3 Marines approaching his home. My husband immediately knew that his firstborn son had been killed. I went to pieces and my husband, as you know, went to pieces and basically tried to accompany his son. Remember, Carlos had no idea what the Marines were there for. Melida wasn't home and Carlos splashed gasoline on himself by mistake. Melida told the Patriot Ledger that he basically wanted to kill himself because of the grief. These lies were parroted by many other mainstream outlets. Maybe Melida has her experience confused with that one scene in Saving Private Ryan. Here's the toilet paper of record in 2007, reporting the lie that Carlos was engaging in self-destruction, not government van destruction, that day. The article says that Carlos doused himself and the van with gasoline. How dramatic! Nothing about the fact that he didn't really mean to douse himself. Now even Carlos goes with the suicide story.
They deliver the news. I set myself on fire.
He now tells all the news media that he was trying to kill himself, not just trash the van.
I ended up inside that van, 26% burn, 2nd and 3rd degrees. The PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder, they also affect many families, was already striking me. They never did nothing about it, saw me going nuts for more than half hour, begging them to leave.
When Marines went to Carlos Arredondo's house to tell him his son had been killed, he says he lost control. He climbed into the Marines' van, doused himself with gasoline, and set the vehicle on fire.
That day, I ended up being in the hospital with 26% of my body burned, 2nd and 3rd degree.
You ended up being in the hospital because you poured gasoline on yourself and lit yourself on fire.
I knew I was going through a difficult moment. I didn't find the comfort or the help. I just lost my mind.
You didn't find the comfort or the help? They came to your house in person and your own mother was there. Are they supposed to bring a priest, a psychiatrist, and antidepressants? Maybe a tranquilizer gun?
Melita Arredondo is Alex's stepmother. She says the incident happened because Carlos's first language is Spanish and he could not understand the Marines.
There are families who don't speak English all over the country. When the Marines came to our house and they didn't speak the language, it caused complications.
I'm pretty sure the language in the United States, at least for a little bit longer, is still English.
Those complications included a fiery explosion that almost killed Carlos.
A fiery explosion caused by Carlos.
I saw this Marine, then I told them, are you guys here to recruit some kids? Because you guys are in the wrong house, the kids are next door. The sergeant responded, no sir, we're here to see the family of the house. And as they continue walking through my door, I say, sir, I'm the homeowner. Why you need to see the family? And he said, you Carlos Arredondo? And then that's when I said, yes, I'm Carlos Arredondo.
Today, even the undisputed facts of the van incident are morphing into a more sympathy-evoking pro-Carlos story. In a 2013 interview for the Tico Costa Rica Times, Carlos said that it was his van that he set on fire. At first I thought this was just a typo, but then the Boston Occupier and Univision's Fusion reported the same thing, as did the woman who interviewed Michael Mayo about his 10,000-word Carlos Arredondo love fest in the Sun Sentinel.
Cowboy hat-wearing Carlos Arredondo is best known for being photographed rushing in to help the victims of the Boston Marathon bombing in April. But in South Florida, he may be remembered as the grieving father who set his van on fire after learning about the death of his son, who was killed in Iraq.
Even Amy Goodman of Democracy Now! Said the van belonged to Carlos at the end of her Boston fake bombing interview with Carlos and Melita.
When Carlos learned he lost his son when the Marines came to his door, he set his van on fire.
And in her article, Searching for Peace at the Boston Marathon Bombing, she says it as well. This is the same article with the picture of the magical, extra bloody pantalones. The problem with Amy jumping on this bandwagon is Carlos very clearly told Amy and the world back in 2006 that it was the military van that the Marines arrived in that he attacked.
Can you talk about that day?
Marine casualty team came to my house, they asked them to leave. I walk out with a hammer, 5-pound hammer, to pretty much ask them to leave my house. Otherwise, I destroy the van. And at that time, I walk out with 5 gallons of gasoline, a propane torch, and I start destroying the U.S. Marine van.
He even said he thought he'd end up deported or in Guantanamo Bay for destroying government property.
I was trying not to get in trouble with that issue because I might be deported. At the time when I was in the hospital, I thought I was going to be ended up in Guantanamo because, I pretty much target a U.S. government property.
Though it's much more heartbreaking to say that a grieving father was so distraught that he trashed his own property than it is if it was property that belonged to someone else. Maybe Amy forgot the harrowing tale that Carlos told her in '06. Or maybe Democracy Now! Is funded by the same foundations that are grooming the Carloses of the world and orchestrating the false flags where these people perform. The most basic search will prove to you that that's what it is. Looks like Amy's searching for funding, not peace. After the van attack incident, Carlos woke up in the hospital 2 days later with 2 strangers by his bedside.
Also, when I wake up in the hospital, I wake up with 2 people that was looking at me.
Could this be when Carlos was recruited for what they planned to do in Boston? Aside from his hospital bills, he thought he was in a lot of trouble.
These 2 well-dressed officers was there, and his case was took over by the FBI and also the Homeland Security.
When I was in the hospital, I thought I was going to be ended up in Guantanamo because, I pretty much target a U.S. government property and all that was taken care.
After my son died, President Bush signed a executive order giving the citizenship to the parents of Sosa's daughter who died in the war in Iraq. I received the first one granted to a parent with the help of Senator Kennedy. Okay.
Make sure you let that sink in. Carlos, still an illegal alien at the time, wakes up to the FBI and Homeland Security by his bedside. There will be no deportation, no Guantanamo Bay, no charges for destroying government property in the rescue that followed. His hospital bills are waived as well, and somehow, unemployed Carlos flies first class to Maine with his wife and mother for his son's funeral. To top it all off, Carlos then receives the very first U.S. citizenship granted to the parent of a soldier killed at war. What might someone agree to in exchange for such leniency and generosity? This is also when the heavy press coverage began. We can't go any further without introducing someone you've probably never seen or heard of. Carlos's first wife and mother of his two sons, Alexander and Brian. Her name is Victoria. While Carlos and Melida hog the limelight in the donations, Alexander and Brian's mother, the person who actually raised them, is relatively forgotten. Here's a quick timeline on Carlos and Melida and the two boys, straight from Michael Mayo's Carlos Arredondo Love Fest entitled Fame in a Flash. Alexander was born in 1984 and Brian in 1987. Victoria files for divorce in 1990, so this is when the boys are 3 and 6. Victoria has restraining orders against Carlos, so he does not see the boys much between 1990 and 1993, when he meets Melida and moves to South Florida with her. Carlos will not return to Massachusetts for at least 7 more years, and even the Fame in a Flash article says he went years without seeing the boys. Alex's first tour of duty in the Marine Corps was in 2002, and he's killed during his second tour of duty in 2004. Brian would take his own life in 2011. Before Alexander joined the military, he lived all of his 17 years and 11 months primarily with his mother. However, since his death in the van incident, Victoria is rarely contacted by the media, and often they think that she is Carlos's sister. Basically, all the attention is directed at Carlos and Melida. Under Mayo's Fame in a Flash article, family members have left comments like this one, trying to set the record straight. My nephews were raised by their mom, Victoria Foley, not these people you choose to idolize and glorify in this piece. It was only out of the kindness of Victoria's heart that she reluctantly let Carlos back into the boys' lives in 2001. Alex was completely indifferent towards his dad, and Brian was enamored. And the woman who disgustingly masquerades as Alex and Brian's mom, he's talking about Melida, is reprehensible, abominable, and the biggest opportunist I've ever had the displeasure of meeting. As of this video's upload date, these comments are still available under the Fame in a Flash article, if one would like to read them in their entirety. I do realize that two different sides of a divorced family might not be fond of each other and are often going to report different versions of past events. But let's keep in mind that two of the people involved here have already shown a penchant for exaggeration and outright lying. Here's an article from 2009 that appeared in Time magazine entitled The Afghan War Through a Marine Mother's Eyes, featuring Melida as Alexander's mother. The word stepmother appears nowhere in the text. Neither does the name of the Marine's mother, Victoria. In an interview from 2011 regarding the renaming of a post office for Alexander, Melida is being interviewed, not Victoria. She talks about hearing some of the great things people who knew Alexander said about him.
When he told me these things, and when I heard them also from some of the other Marines who served with him, I knew that was my kid.
You knew that was your kid? No, Melida, that was not your kid.
I knew that was the young man who I got to know when he was 8 years old.
You maybe met him when he was 8 years old, then you and his father moved away for the next 7 years.
Until the very end, that was the young man who I knew.
Barely. Then she tries to take credit for some of Alex's traits when she does not share any blood with him.
The Marine Corps and Alex were a very good match in that we have a trait of OCD in our family.
Genetic traits are spread from parents to offspring. Any traits Alex had nothing to do with you. Melida also thinks that because Carlos took Alexander to some community events before the age of 6, after which he would barely see him again until the boy was 16, and because Alex volunteered once where she works, that they deserve the credit for Alex deciding to serve his country.
So, the idea of service, we were responsible.
Alexander Arredondo never even lived with these people. This is my favorite part. Carlos and Melida were interviewed on Radio Boston 2 days after the faked bombings. The host asked them if they'd seen Jeff or his family since Monday.
Have you seen Jeff or his family since Monday?
No, I haven't heard from his family, or we haven't heard from his family.
No, this morning we spoke with his stepmother. You spoke with his stepmother this morning.
So we're supposed to believe that Carlos forgot that he spoke to the family of the man he supposedly saved just that morning and found out that the guy's okay? Do these two even discuss their lives with each other before they do their interviews? Carlos said this in a speech to IVAW in 2011.
Alexander was struck by a bullet a bullet in his left temple, which opened his head inch and a half.
Yet this is the picture that he carries around of Alexander. No trauma whatsoever to the very visible left temple of this young man. In another interview uploaded in 2007, Carlos said this about Alexander.
He got hit by a bullet in his right temple.
By a bullet in his left temple. Alexander received a shot from the sniper that hit him right in the temple.
Hit by a bullet in his right temple.
Left temple.
Right temple.
Right in the temple.
Maybe the Marines or the funeral home do some amazing reconstructive work, but I still don't understand how a father could ever forget on which side of the head his son was shot. This handsome young man is Carlos and Victoria's son Brian, who was 17 when Alexander was killed. Carlos knows how old he was.
I have another son whose name is Brian. He was 17 at the time.
Amy Goodman knows it too, but Melida corrects Amy with incorrect information.
And Brian then was 17 years old?
At that time, he was 16.
16.
Brian was born May 10th, 1987, so he was 17 when his brother was killed. Back in 2006, when Carlos became a citizen, he legally changed his name to his son's names. He went from being Carlos Luis de Los Angeles Arredondo Piedra to Alexander Brian Arredondo. This disturbed their mother, Victoria. She didn't understand why Carlos would take Brian's name when Brian was still alive. Quote, "I mean, honestly, why would you take his name when he's still there, right next to you?" Victoria said. "In my mind, he already had Brian dead." Brian had been in and out of trouble since his older brother's death. Carlos and Melida bailed him out of jail in early November 2011, a few days before they brought him along to take part in a Veterans Day event. They'd use him as a prop when they wanted him around for the cameras, Victoria said. Brian took his own life at age 24 in 2011. Carlos, Melida, and the media are all quick to blame Alexander's death in Iraq for Brian's suicide every time the subject comes up, even though Alexander died 7 years before his brother did. According to a close family member commenting under Fame in a Flash, Brian had been staying with Carlos in the weeks prior to his suicide. 7 days before he actually took his own life, Carlos dropped Brian at Victoria's house, throwing his bags out of his truck and saying, "You take him. He's an a-hole and I can't do anything with him." Here's a series of pictures of Carlos and Melida at the funeral home seeing Brian's body for the first time. Why do we have these bizarre pictures? Well, because there was a Time magazine documentary reporter on the scene. Yes, it seems that Carlos and Melida arranged to meet with a Time magazine photographer at the funeral home so he could capture their despair. Also, please note that Carlos seems to have made up a deceased son button for Brian already as well. Mind you, according to the article, this is the first time they've come to see him. Also, same day, the reporter follows Carlos to his memorial set up for his son Alex and photographs him adding Brian's name to the signs. Then, back to the apartment for more sad faces and pictures. Remember, this is a reporter from Time magazine, not some local paper. Is this something that typical parents would want or do? Does this seem like normal behavior of bereaved parents? What parent would want to have a photographer at the funeral home to capture their grief when they came to view their deceased son for the first time? For what purpose would they need or want their grief cataloged in such detail? And why would Time magazine bother sending a photographer for this? Though they still live together, Melida and Carlos are divorced. A very close source from Victoria's side of the family feels their divorce was simply so that Carlos and Melida could hide and divide monies in banks donated on behalf of Alex and Brian. The boy's mother, Victoria, said, "I think Carlos and Melida are always looking for the limelight any way they can, and now they don't have any more sons to die." Carlos's motive? Easy. Same as Jeff and most of the other Boston liars. Money in the form of donations. Sympathy. Adoration.
Unpaid ambassador.
Unpaid. Carlos is a lot of things, but unpaid is not one of them. Since his inspirational story of fake heroism hit the mainstream, he's been to Miami, Wisconsin, Maine, New York, Toronto, Washington, D.C., all expenses paid, of course. He's also been to the south of France and Costa Rica with Jeff and Melida and friends and family and a lot of other phonies from the Boston False Flag. In Costa Rica, he had an audience with the president. In Miami, he took part in a television salute to Latino heroes. In New York, he was saluted for being a good stooge by the Red Cross at its annual banquet. Massive amounts of media coverage like the 8-page spread in the Sun Sentinel. Guest of honor at big charity events. Awards for his bravery. Meeting celebrities and politicians. Courtside seats at sporting events. National airtime at the World Series. He and Jeff traveled to Toronto for a National Hockey League alumni gala. They have thrown out the ceremonial first pitch at Fenway, dropped the ceremonial first puck at a Bruins playoff game, and have been honored at the New England Patriots home opener. After the fake bombings, people donated over $6,000 toward buying Carlos a new vehicle. And 4 days later, a car dealership in Massachusetts decided to just give him a brand new 2014 Toyota Tacoma extended cab pickup truck. He got the $6,000 too. More fundraisers and even a parade in his honor. He now has a publicist and a literary agent, and just like Jeff, is working on a book deal. Here's Carlos modeling his new Arredondo Strong t-shirts. That's right, not just Boston Strong, Arredondo Strong. They arrived along with a box of cowboy hats to pass out and promote the Carlos brand. He says he doesn't like the label Hero, but his Facebook page is called Carlos Arredondo Boston Hero Gold Star Dad. He says he doesn't want anything and he doesn't charge for his appearances, but if someone offers a gift, he snatches it right up. He says he doesn't seek attention, but he wears that hat when he goes out and is repeatedly stopped by strangers who want his picture and his autograph.
We didn't ask for any of these, we just been handling the best we can, you know what I mean?
Yeah. And he's been, rewarded with, he goes out, people recognize him, he gets his meals comped, he people want to photograph him, he gets invited to all these different cool charity events and goes to ball games.
Also, the U.S. Justice Department just announced that they're issuing an $8.4 million grant for Boston victims, witnesses, and first responders. Yes, even if you knew from the beginning that this was all a hoax, the government is taking a chunk of the money they took from you and giving it to the people involved in this farce. Carlos is considered a witness and the bestest first responder ever. I wonder how much of it will go to Carlos and Melida. Meanwhile, the woman who actually raised Alexander and Brian is having a hard time making ends meet. Does this sound fair or right or inspirational to you? Aside from terrorizing the American people with another liberty-destroying incident, this time in the bastion of American freedom, the city of Boston, and using the contrived event to place the city under martial law, forcing people out of their homes and into the streets with their hands on their heads like criminals, while militarized police violated their Fourth Amendment rights and searched their homes like a surprise shakedown in a prison. They know that a country divided against itself cannot stand. Get the people fighting against one another, and they will never unite to take back their freedoms, and they'll certainly never go after those who have taken them away. This is why the media is constantly fanning the flames of racism, and major so-called stars like this piece of traitorous trash, back from her recent depopulation meeting with David Rockefeller, Bill Gates, and other eugenicists, comes under no fire for saying things like this.
There are still generations of people, older people, who were born and bred and marinated in it, in that prejudice and racism, and they just have to die.
This Carlos Arredondo story is part of a plan to influence the decisions of enough Americans that they acquiesce to an enormous step forward toward another part of the cabal's divide and conquer strategy: multiculturalism. The fancy name they've given the plan is immigration reform, but it's nothing more than amnesty and the introduction into the job market, and more importantly for them, the voting base of tens of millions of illegal aliens currently within the U.S. Our liar-in-chief uses the figure of 11 million illegals here currently, so you know it's much higher than that. I've seen estimates of 20 million and up, with an additional 10,000 illegals added every day because our borders are not secure. Those pushing for this amnesty bill tell us we're a nation of immigrants, as if somehow the instant legalization of tens of millions of people, mainly from south of the Mexican border, who chose to come here illegally, is something similar to the days of old when people came here from other countries, assimilated into the culture, learned English, and became Americans. This is something completely different. This is literally a New World Order-sponsored invasion. This is an out-of-control inward flow of people into an already bankrupt, beat-down country that cannot afford them. Flooding a territory with masses of the poor in order to gain control of it is an old communist revolutionary tactic. The cabal knows that a strong society has at its foundation a unique culture and a common language. So these illegals are not encouraged to assimilate. Many of these people have no intention of learning the English language, something that was once required of all new citizens. That's why you have to press 1 for English. This is also why we have relatively open borders and incentives for people to migrate here illegally, to cause division in this country, drive down wages, and drive up competition for the few jobs that are left. This will ensure an eventual civil war scenario that will benefit no one but the Rockefeller bankster cabal. A lot of these immigrant pawns even subscribe to the ideology of Reconquista. They've been taught that states such as Texas, California, Arizona, and New Mexico have been stolen by the gringo. They call this area Aztlan, and they want to reclaim it and return the land to Mexico. The plot to do this involves a political and demographic revolution, replacing the Americans in the Southwest with an influx of illegal Mexican immigrants. I'm thinking a huge amnesty might help with that plan. According to Mario Obeldo, former head of MALDEF, California is going to be a Hispanic state. Anyone who does not like it should leave.
There's so much interesting stuff from the 2010 census, and we told you about how Latinos will soon be the majority in the Golden State. Now take a look at these percentage population figures. Now you see there in that red line, pick up about 75% of Californians. That's back in the 60s, but that number keeps on dropping here. This pink line, that's Latinos. That keeps, and they cross. You see that there? Almost tied at Latinos with 40%.
In 1998, Obeldo was awarded the Presidential Medal of Freedom by Clinton. David Rockefeller got one too. I guess it's one of those oxymoronic awards like the Peace Prize. The Rockefeller cabal is actively working to transform the U.S. into a borderless society, a cornerstone of the globalist vision and the endgame of world government. This movement is backed by racist groups like La Raza and MALDEF, Hispanic supremacist lobbying groups that consider border control racist. La Raza literally means the race. Our traitor-in-chief is very pro-amnesty.
We should pass immigration reform.
Current Homeland Security Secretary Jay Johnson calls for amnesty and says that illegal immigrants have earned the right to be U.S. citizens. You know, by coming here illegally. Jay Johnson is the grandson of Charles S. Johnson, who was the nation's foremost scholar in the field of black sociology, funded by the Rockefellers. The current director of the White House Domestic Policy Council is Cecilia Munoz, former senior vice president for the Office of Research, Advocacy, and Legislation at La Raza.
I'm Cecilia Munoz, and I'm the director of Intergovernmental Affairs at the White House, and I'm also an advisor to President Obama on immigration issues.
Did you get that? A person advising the pro-amnesty liar-in-chief on immigration affairs was a former vice president in an office of a Hispanic supremacy group called The Race. And the founder of La Raza, Jose Gutierrez, is very outspoken against the gringo.
We recognize that the barriers to our integrating into the society and to uplifting ourselves is the gringo who's put the barriers, who makes us, drop out of school, who keeps us in bad health, who doesn't pay us good wages, who prohibits our unions, and so on and so on and so on. So until we get rid of those elements, we're not going to progress. We're not going to be free. So yes, the gringo must go.
We were convinced that we were the generation that was going to recover the land in the Southwest, not by taking the land, but by taking political control of the institutions in the land.
Across the Bay Area.
We remain a hunted people. Now you think you have a destiny to fulfill in this land that historically has been ours for 40,000 years. And we're a new mestizo nation. This is our homeland. We cannot, we will not, and we must not be made illegal in our own homeland. We are not immigrants that came from another country to another country. We are migrants free to travel the length and breadth of the Americas because we belong here. We are millions. We just have to survive. We have an aging white America. They are not making babies. They're dying. It's a matter of time. The explosion is in our population.
We're the future and we have potential power. When are we going to realize it? When are we going to paint the White House brown?
I don't think so.
Make sure you check out Mr. Gutierrez's book, A Chicano Manual on How to Handle Gringos. A look at La Raza's list of contributors for 2012 shows some of the largest corporations in America, along with many companies that are either directly owned or controlled by the Rockefeller family for quite some time. It's also interesting to note that La Raza receives contributions from some organizations that are always asking for donations from us, including the American Cancer Society, American Diabetes Association, and the American Heart Association. So they get you to give them money and they give it to La Raza. Other donors of note include the U.S. Army Reserve, CIA, CDC, Health and Human Services, Homeland Security, HUD, the U.S. Department of Labor, and the Department of the Treasury. Both La Raza and MALDEF were created by the Ford Foundation and are very well funded by Ford along with the Gates and Rockefeller Foundations, the very people who want us poisoned with vaccines and GMOs, and who aren't afraid to admit that they're proud to be secretly working to depopulate and destroy the U.S. These groups spend a lot of their millions on advertising. These are just some of the ads I saw while researching this video, and not a single anti-amnesty ad went by. David Rockefeller's Center for Latin American Studies has been exploring how to Latinize the U.S. for many years, publishing books like Latinos Remaking America, Integrating the Americas, and Passing Lines, Sexuality and Immigration, which seeks to stimulate dialogue on the role of sexuality and sexual orientation in immigration to the U.S. from Latin America and the Caribbean. I don't own this book, but I wonder if it ties in somehow with the Rockefeller Foundation's decades-long campaign to make homosexuality the norm and destroy the family.
What's wrong with that?
David Rockefeller brags on page 439 of his book Memoirs that he's met every Mexican head of state since World War II, several of them many times. How unfortunate for the people of Mexico. When the Rockefeller Foundation brought their Green Revolution to Mexico in the 1940s, the country was growing sufficient food to feed its population and was a net food exporter, sending vegetables, fruit, cattle, and coffee to the United States. The USDA had deemed it largely self-sufficient in food and fiber. By the 1950s, the Rockefeller schemes caused the Mexican government to have to begin importing larger and larger quantities of grain every year. Food production continued to decline, pushing small farmers off the land, replacing them with huge agribusiness, and pushing millions of peasants across the border to the north, which was the plan all along. It's no coincidence that the superhero at the Boston false flag migrated here illegally from Central America. The Rockefeller-controlled media wasted no time before saying, "Thank God he did so. Look at what a great thing that turned out to be." In this Boston Globe article, the writer is glad that Carlos wasn't deported when he was illegal because Jeff Bowman is alive because of it. Also, that a fitting tribute to him would be to grant citizenship to all the illegals currently here, and goes on to say that most of them come here to work, not live off the government dole. Though Judicial Watch points to actual Census Bureau data that reveals that most U.S. families headed by illegal immigrants use taxpayer-funded welfare programs on behalf of their American-born children, and that the majority of households across the country benefited from publicly funded welfare programs are headed by immigrants. On another site, the article states that whatever crimes illegal immigrants commit, at least they're not flying planes into buildings and building bombs to kill Americans. The writer goes on to remind us that Carlos came here illegally from Costa Rica, that Jeff Bowman survived the bombings due to the courage of Carlos, and that we need to think of the positive things that come with having people like Carlos here and develop immigration reform accordingly. And bloggers saying, "See that guy in the cowboy hat? He's an immigrant. This is the kind of guy we want coming into the U.S. This guy needs to become the face of immigration." And this Pat McMahon guy looking like Hannibal Lecter, here to tell the white Anglo guy that he ought to remember the name Carlos Arredondo because that man's a hero. The Latino Post honors Carlos during their top feel-good Latino moments of 2013 feature, calling him, of course, a hero for saving Jeff, and luckily he wasn't deported. A website called America's Voice, which hits you with a huge pop-up encouraging you to let Congress know you're all about citizenship for tens of millions of illegal aliens currently here, also points out that Carlos, who was once illegal, is the guy who saved Jeff. Brian Williams, conducting Jeff Bowman's first ever interview after his so-called recovery, credits Carlos for Jeff's very existence.
And without him, there's no you. And now you're destined to be friends for the rest of your lives.
That's it's pretty insane. That's cool.
Carlos himself has been quoted as saying, "We are people who come here humbly to work. There are very few who come to do evil deeds. We're mostly hard-working people who are here to really contribute to the progress of the country." Though Carlos has been on government disability and Medicaid since at least 2004. Yes, he can supposedly jump barriers and perform amazing rescues, but he can't work. He's got PTSD, you know, from the death of the sons that were basically raised by Victoria. As for evil deeds, no doubt he's referring to the Chechnyan patsies. But wouldn't lying to the country and the entire world and being part of a conspiracy against one's fellow man also count as an evil deed? In case anyone tries to tell you that Carlos has nothing to do with La Raza and the Rockefeller plan for the Latinization of the United States, here's an amnesty poster from his Facebook page. And check out his shirt. Coordinadora Estudiantil de La Raza, which means student coordinator of La Raza, the same shirt that this group of lovely people wore when they marched on the streets of East LA, which they consider occupied Mexico, waving their Mexican flags high and proud and chanting, "Esta es mi tierra, esta es mi lucha." This is my land, this is my fight. This whole fake Carlos Arredondo as savior story helps to garner support for the immigration reform/amnesty bill. The amazing story about a brave rescue of a sweet all-American boy named Jeff by this courageous man from Latin America named Carlos. They want to appeal to your emotions instead of your common sense that would tell you how disastrous this bill would be for what's left of this country. The Boston bombings hoax is just another Rockefeller psyop, like the War of the Worlds broadcast, 9/11, Sandy hoax, etc. And if we let them, they're going to grant instant citizenship to tens of millions of people who have no plans to assimilate into this culture, transforming the rule of law and the political future of this nation, and not for the better. In case someone's going to whip out the all-purpose racism word, this is not at all against Hispanic people. This is an attempt to point out that, within the Rockefeller plans for this country, which are nothing short of its complete destruction, the immigrant population is being used and propagandized, just like the American population has been dumbed down and drugged up to eliminate any resistance to what is happening. I would have made this video to point out the psyop regardless of the ethnic group that was being exploited. Using any group to promote hatred of the history, identity, culture, language, and laws of the United States is evil and treasonous and typical of David Rockefeller, his family, and their cohorts. If you think even for a minute that they're doing this because they want what's good for the Latino people, you need to step away from the television set and put down your antidepressants and neurotoxin-laced soda and listen carefully. Some very bad people are destroying your country. You're happy just to have a roof over your head and your TV shows? They're not even going to let you have that. La Raza and MALDEF also need to take note. The foundations funding them do not care about the well-being of the people of the Third World. They want only to exploit them in an effort to accomplish their one-world eugenics depopulation agenda. Illegal immigration is a problem that would fix itself if the people who come here illegally could not get jobs or government assistance. None of this will happen without our strong and vocal insistence. Their bankster puppet Obama has promised to get this amnesty bill passed this year, and the bill has already passed the Senate. If you realize the importance of this issue and would like to do something about it, there's a fantastic website called Numbers USA that contains a lot of great information and plans of action that you can take to spread the word and let your supposed representatives know that you oppose this ridiculous amnesty scheme. They're trying to pass this right now, and they're counting on us to remain apathetic. They've been having their way with us for long enough. Today, the Moranathon is about these guys, but if we let this happen, we're the morons.
What a country.
Don't be the CIA's next patsy, a 10-step program. November 24th, 2013 marks 50 years since the death of the patron saint of patsies, Lee Harvey Oswald. In today's world, an increasingly common pitfall is finding that you, like Oswald, have been blamed for a CIA false flag. These practical steps will help you avoid this perilous predicament. Modern life presents some unique challenges: STDs, student loans, banks seizing your accounts, etc. None is greater than the danger of becoming a patsy. Not that kind of patsy, I'm talking about a scapegoat. In this case, someone blamed for an act that the CIA commits. This short video will help you avoid being the target of a massive televised manhunt and likely being murdered in the process. You see, being a patsy means you cannot be arrested and tried in a court of law. You cannot be allowed to speak publicly.
I'd like some legal representation. Kill the president. No, sir, I didn't. I'm just a patsy.
Whoa, can't let that happen again. That would defeat the whole purpose of blaming you for something they did. They may pretend you died resisting arrest. Even if they arrest you alive, you might somehow end up like this. So let's take a look at some of the things we all can do, or at least be aware of, that will hopefully help prevent us from becoming the next CIA or FBI dupe. Step number 1. Do not, under any circumstances, agree to participate in a drill designed to test precautions against a terror attack, no matter how much money they offer or how much they appeal to your patriotic instincts. This is a sorry, no can do. Also, wherever this drill is, make sure you are 100 miles away. Step number 2. Convert to Judaism. Patsies are never Jews. Your local synagogue will provide information on Talmud Torah classes. Step number 3. Keep in mind that patsies can be teenagers. Dzhokhar Tsarnaev is only 19. If you are a teenager or even a child, do not assume you are safe. Babies can rest easy for now. Step number 4. Question your gender. Homosexuality also confers immunity against becoming a patsy. If you are still in school, join a gay-straight alliance. They will help you with the conversion process. Step number 5. If you cannot become a Jew or homosexual, at least establish your liberal bona fides. Let slip that you voted for Barack Obama, love Dianne Feinstein, read the New York Times, and watch Jon Stewart and SNL religiously. Put a PBS bumper sticker on your car. Patsies are never liberals. Step number 6. Prepare a plan to follow in case they still make you the terrorist. You will need a hideout that is better than a boat parked in a backyard. Don't let them catch you, because when the bullets are flying, protesting your innocence won't cut it. Even your mother's testimony that you've been in touch with the FBI for years will be ignored.
No, my son would never do this. My son, it's set up. He was controlled by FBI like for 5 years.
Step number 7. Make sure your complexion is not dark, resembling a Muslim. There are cosmetic products that will help you lighten your complexion. Avoid suntans. You should not be mistaken for a Muslim. Your life depends on it. Also, do your best to not appear menacing. This may or may not be helpful. If you do appear completely harmless or simply a confused patsy, a sketch artist will be appointed to represent you in a suitably threatening manner. Step number 8. Make burial arrangements in advance. When the public has been incited to believe you are the incarnation of evil, funeral directors will have a hard time accepting your business. Step number 9. Study the lives of some of the great patsies in modern history. Lee Harvey Oswald, James Earl Ray, Sirhan Sirhan, Timothy McVeigh, Osama bin Laden, James Holmes, Adam Lanza. What mistakes did they make that you can avoid? Certainly one is getting involved with a CIA-FBI front group. Step number 10. Avoid friendly strangers with deep pockets who offer to arrange foreign travel and adventure for you and your friends. And if you're in a group of people and you can't figure out who the patsy is, then the patsy is you. One last note. Anyone who believes the mass media accounts of these terror attacks is also a patsy, as are people who support the West's NWO-inspired aggression. Don't be one. This article and many more exposing feminism in the New World Order can be found at henrymacko.com.